I'm actually excited for this one also, Alex, because I have a good intro question to ask, and I often don't.
Oh no.
Yeah,
I'm a little scared. I
it's
hope
a
my
good.
answer is as good as your question.
It's great. I'm like, oh, I feel like this is a good starter. But
Awesome.
before we dive in, how I always start is just like, hey, for those listening that have no idea who Alex Cattoni is, what you're about, what you're passionate about, how do you describe yourself? Like, who are you?
Oh, just those questions I ask myself every night as I lay in bed. Who am I? Um, I I mean, usually what I say is I am I'm the founder of the Copy Posse. I'm a copywriter and I help people sort of use words to make an impact and make more money,
Oh, so succinct,
very
succinct.
simply.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You didn't even go at all down a philosophical rabbit hole or a meandering existential crisis. That was good. Okay.
Who am I and
Are
why am I here?
are you ready for my question?
Yeah.
Okay. So I feel like I should be wearing a tie right now, and then I should like straighten it and be like, okay. So Alex Cattoni, you've been described on your website as a marketing genius. And I read and I read that you want to quote de-douchify the internet. Can you please explain what de-douchifying the internet means?
Yes. That is the best question ever because it is my mission to de-douchify the internet. So I have to kind of tell you how this word came about because when I first started my business, I was honestly just jaded by marketing. I mean, I'd been in the marketing world for over a decade behind the scenes. And I think this happens to a lot of people. It's like from the outside looking in, you're like, ooh, everyone's so smart. And I was a marketer in the personal development world too. So on top of learning marketing, as I was also learning from all of these incredible like gurus, air quotes. And I remember just thinking like, wow, this is the best business industry in the world. And then you get into it and you're just like, holy crap, there are so many douche nozzles and charlatans and people promising the moon and under delivering. And I remember just going through this like phase where I was so jaded, I could have just given it all up and gone back to working at the Keg Steakhouse. Which
Oh,
honestly, sidebar, that's where I learned my first lesson in sales, which is they used to say to us when we bring the steak to the table, they would say, Alex, remember, you're not selling the steak, you're selling the sizzle. And that was my first lesson in marketing. That's why I'm a marketing genius, because I sell the sizzle.
yeah.
Anyway, going back to de-douchify is I knew that that's why I started my business, but I didn't come out guns blazing with that. And then one time I was on a call and someone asked me about like why I started my business and it just fell out of my mouth. I was like, I just want to de-douchify the internet. And as soon as I said it, I was like, ooh. And then I didn't do anything with it because then I was afraid of offending douchebags. And I was like, maybe I shouldn't say this. And then I was like, F that. I totally wanted to de-douchify the internet. And that became, the short version of my entire mission at the Copy Posse.
And it's a good example of, I think, everything that you are with that business. It's about using words that have impact, that are memorable in an authentic way that's unique to your voice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know I certainly have gotten a lot of shit over the years for using profanity. And then I've tried not to do that. And it's like, I can't. It's like, it's just not me.
It's not you. No. And honestly, like going back to marketing and any communication, it's saying what you want to say in as few words as possible. When I say de-douchify, which, okay, let's call that one word because there's a hyphen. The internet, 3 words. I mean, everybody knows what I mean when I say that. Everybody, because everybody has been on the receiving end of shitty marketing. And so that to me is exactly what you said. It embodies not only my mission, but it's so me. It's so my brand. It's so being the rebel and not being afraid to ruffle feathers and being bold and claiming who you are and what you want to say and saying it. And so, yeah, and I have ruffled feathers. I have people email me saying, why would I ever learn marketing from anybody who uses the word dedouchify? It's not even a word. And I'm like, okay, bye.
And it weeds people out though, right? And I think that's
Yeah.
the good thing about polarizing language is for every email that you get on that end of the spectrum, that's like, you crazy witch lady, I will never pay you $1. There's someone else on the other end of the spectrum that's like, oh my God, I love you. I've never heard that word. Take
You're
my
the one
money, Alex.
you're the one I've been waiting for. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's tricky. Okay, so let's step back maybe. And when you alluded to the marketing industry being filled with, I think you said douche nozzles, if I'm not mistaken
Yeah.
there, which is,
Technical term.
it's beautiful. Uh, and in my experience, the personal development industry has its own share of charlatans, frauds, manipulators, less than ethical humans. But maybe we can step back and talk about, what is marketing at a simplistic way, because I think for a lot of people, marketing is seen as an icky topic. It's bad, it's manipulative. And I know that I hope that you have a different take on that. It'd be awkward if you're like, no, yeah.
That's it. Nailed it.
Yeah, I'm an evil genius. So yeah, like what does marketing mean to you and how does it distinguish itself from manipulation, or what's the relationship between those two?
Yeah, great question. Obviously, I have a different definition. And like, just so everyone's listening, I really see marketing and copywriting as being kind of one and the same. And often people will ask me that because I'll use those words interchangeably. Copywriting is using words for the sake of sales and marketing. And then marketing is just like kind of that higher level general term of marketing, which is obviously words and messaging, but it could also mean metrics and testing and all the more technical side of marketing as well. But, to me, marketing is solving problems and helping the right people solve problems at its simplest definition. And then copywriting is using words in order to do that. And so when people ask me the difference between what I would call douchey marketing and or pushy marketing and persuasive marketing, is one is very push. It's very like, I'm gonna tell you that this is the greatest deal you've ever seen in the world, and use a million different exclamation marks and use fake scarcity and fake testimonials and misleading clickbank and forced continuity and fine print and all of that stuff that people look at and go, oh no, I hate marketing, because I don't blame you. That's the same crap that I was also sick of, which is why I started my business. And then persuasive marketing, which is more of a pull strategy. It's like, hey, I'm not going to force this down your throat. I'm going to show you how this can help you solve your problem. And if that feels good to you, like, welcome, welcome, friends, And I think the market, as in the audience and people out there buying stuff, they've gotten so savvy to what is marketing that, like, those old school, really sort of sleazy used car salesman, icky tactics that used to work because they worked because they were novel and enough people weren't aware of what was really happening. It was like, oh, this person says I have to buy now or else. I guess I better buy now, And now people are like, wait a second. And you see this happening. And it's not just, it's across all industries. Like, people are taking longer to buy because they are taking more time to weigh their options. They are taking more time to understand the brands behind the businesses. They don't blindly believe every single thing they see online. They're skeptical. And to me, that's the best. I love a good skeptic because it means you're probably making smarter buying decisions. And I like skeptics are my favorite because I'm probably one of the most skeptical, cynical people out there.
Same. Yeah. My background as a scientist requires a black
Right.
belt in skepticism and just questioning everything, much to the annoyance of my partner occasionally. But it sounds like the distinction is between the intention underneath the marketing. So are you trying to take from the person? Are you trying to manipulate, versus are you trying to offer communicate who you are and what you've got to the best of your ability? Are you trying to show off what you've got? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. And I think what's really cool and like what I consider sort of modern marketing now is that anyone out there can use like social media or other platforms to reach an audience. Whereas before, marketing felt like, oh, it's this thing that only a few people really, know how to do. And you picture these Mad Men era executives around a board table, and it's like they have meetings just around like, how can we manipulate people, and the interesting thing about the word manipulation is that it's gotten a really negative connotation, of course, but when you actually like translate the root of the word, it just means like changing things by hand. Like man is hand, and then anyway, I could look up the exact etymology of it, but in this word manipulate is like, yes, marketing can be seen as manipulation in a bad way, but if you look at it through the lens of marketing is delivering a message and letting the customer have the control about whether or not they want to receive that message, I think that's the pendulum swing that's happening. Is good marketing today is about actually putting control into the customer's hands, letting them decide who, where, why, when they want to buy from someone. And that's actually really exciting to me because people are now able to learn from whoever they want, not just, oh, the big, huge brands that have the budgets and can buy the Super Bowl commercial ad spots. Now you have someone who, let's say, is like really passionate about gardening. We were talking about gardening before we pushed record. That person who like lives and breathes gardening can now start a business where they're helping someone who really wants to learn gardening. And so what's happening is the power used to be in like the select few who had the budgets and the tools and the access to be great marketers. And now everybody has access to these tools. And it means that the people who have great messages and are able to really serve people in that way are learning how to do that. And the people over here are getting kind of freaked out about it. I mean, you see a lot of the old school types of brands going, oh my God, we can't compete with these influencers who now have, millions of followers because they have more reach than we do now as people move online and onto social networks. And so I think there's like a real distribution of a decentralization of marketing power happening, which is exciting.
Yeah, it's like the trade-off, right? Whereby now everybody is a marketer or can be an influencer, whether that's, 10 followers or 1 million followers. You have influence. If people are following your work and your life and you are friends or family with them, like you're an influencer. And I love this idea that manipulation can be not just a negative, but a positive, right? If you are manipulating someone in a positive manner, that's like encouragement, right? Or, hey, great job. Feedback is a form of manipulation in some regard. I'm proud of you, the form of manipulation, one would argue. So then how does one, I was thinking of myself and the marketing nowadays, it seems as if there's a lot of personal brands. There's a lot of individuals offering things for sale, but I look at it almost like all of my content is wrapped up under this larger marketing umbrella, whereby I'm not always asking, I'm not always selling. Whereas like you watch a commercial on TV and it's like the commercial is asking you to buy some shit all the time. Like every commercial is like, hey, buy this thing. Here's a product, razzle dazzle. Look at this shiny thing. Give me your money. Whereas it seems like there's this sort of new approach because of social media, whereby you build a relationship or you establish a community or some connection that's ongoing, and you give and give and give, and then you offer something as an exchange. Do you have anything to say on, did that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and again, it's a bit of that shift where, I come from, when I first learned marketing and copywriting, I came from like the direct response marketing world, which anyone who doesn't know what direct response is literally you send traffic, AKA eyeballs, whatever, advertising, awareness, attention to an ad of some sort. And then you're directly measuring the impact of that ad. Like how many people out of 100 bought who saw it kind of thing. And it's all about optimizing for that conversion metric. It was all like, how many eyeballs saw this ad, and then how many people bought, and then how do we make it better? And so it was all about like manipulating, the ad, the copy, the messaging to get people to buy right away. And now what I think again is happening is like marketing is like you're saying, it's no longer just about that. It's about building a relationship with an audience who then trusts you enough to then want to give you their money. And what you're seeing is people are taking a lot longer to buy. It used to be that if someone didn't buy within like, let's say 7 days of seeing a Facebook ad, the old school thought was literally buy, die, or unsubscribe. Like they're either going to buy, they're going to die, or they're going to unsubscribe from my list. And then they're basically like, they're gone. They're out of my world. So it was all about how can we get as much money out of people as quickly as possible. And what you're seeing now is people are just taking longer to buy. So when I look at my metrics, the vast majority of people in my business purchase after 30 days, 60 days, like even 90 days. I have people who have been part of my community for over a year, 2 years, and until they made their first purchase. And I think the importance of that is just understanding buying behavior, where people don't only want to know what you do or what you offer, but they want to know who you are. And so when I think of what you're talking about, it's, hey, this is who I am. Like I'm Jer. I have this business. I have this podcast. I have this book. And people want to get to know who you are. And so then when it is time for you to offer something, you can say, hey, I also have this really cool thing over here, and you can go buy now. And those two ideas working together, to me, is what makes really good marketing. So the way I kind of talk about it is a mix of direct response marketing, because don't get me wrong, you still want to be able to get people to take action. You don't want to be someone who's like, it's okay, you never have to buy. Like, you want to give people a reason to buy, of course. Like we're in the business of making money as business owners. We have to pay bills. That's our job. But this mix of direct response marketing with brand storytelling and relationship building, to me, is where modern marketing is going, which is why you see so much like user generated content now, or people like big brands who have never really used social media going to influencers or people who have audiences to say, hey, can you help, showcase this product, use this product? But it's no longer about just being like, go buy now. It's integrating it into their daily lives, into their makeup routines, into like the smoothies they make. It's all about like what is real, and if it really is real, but how can we make marketing a conversation that's ongoing rather than just like this singular event that happens.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to summarize what I was attempting to ask before. Like, it's no longer just a one and done kind of approach. It's more like a courtship or an ongoing relationship, really. And for me, like, I don't want to spend money with assholes or douche nozzles, to use your language. Like, I want to invest in people that are good humans, that have good hearts, that are also doing good in the world that I can learn from. And if that means I need to take a week or a month longer to actually tease out the energy of this human, then I'm going to do that. And I think that's what you're describing here. And I think that's one reason why your business is so successful, is because, like, just full transparency, Alex and I are homies, like we're friends, but like, you're a good human. Like, you're great at what you do. You're a marketing genius, of course, but also like, you're a good human. You care, you have integrity, you want people to succeed. And you can't necessarily fake that over the long term. But whereas in the short term, previously you could, but nowadays with social media and everything, you get found out quick and your reputation can disappear immediately. So any advice for those listening in terms of like, how do you build a relationship with an audience over time using copywriting, marketing, words that work? Like, how I know I have a note that we're supposed to talk about storytelling. I don't know if like this is the time, but like, this is
a good time to talk about storytelling.
Okay.
Yeah. Good cue. Thank you.
All right. I mean, honestly, as I said, you could talk about whatever the hell you want today. It's all good.
No, but storytelling, 1,000%. We are all obsessed with storytelling. I mean, look at the shows we watch, the podcasts we listen to. I know for me, like stories, run my entire life. If all I could do is tell and talk about stories and listen to other people's stories, like I find that genuinely super interesting. And I know I'm not the only one. I mean, there's been tons of studies that prove that, like, people remember stories 22 times more likely than they remember facts. Or there was a case study that I like to reference. It was done by, God, I want to say there was like an organization called Save the Children, which had brochures and stuff to get people to donate to, children in need. And they did this test on sending out a brochure. One had all this fact-based information about the number of people that you would be supporting if you donated to this cause, and how many kids were impacted, and like very fact-based information, versus another one that they tested, which was literally just the story of one girl, a 7-year-old girl who was battling, starvation, and the story of how her life was saved. One girl, that's it. And it was these two different brochures. And I'm a storytelling geek, and like you, I love research. And so for me to kind of know, it's not just that we like to sit around a campfire and tell ghost stories, even though we all probably remember our favorite ghost story from when we were a kid. Stories are memorable to people, and they bring your reader's guard down in a way, again, not to sound like, ha ha ha, I'm an evil genius, I'm going to bring your guard down, and when you're least expecting it, I'm going to slide in and sell you something. But there's a term called narrative transport that's used in writing and screenwriting, where you get lost in story. So if I send you an email about something maybe that I'm trying to sell, right, and I say, hey Jer, guess what, special offer for the next 3 days, I'm going to give you like immediately you're like, no, don't have time for this. But if I email you and say, hey, Jer, oh my gosh, you'll never guess what happened to me the other day. I was walking down the street, and like, I don't know where I'm going with this story, but immediately you're like, what happened? Right. And so storytelling to me is one of the best ways to communicate in marketing. And one of the reasons for that, aside from the fact that we know it's memorable and it brings people's guard down, and it kind of cuts through any skepticism, because it's real, is that it's what makes you different than anybody else. Your stories are you. And so if you're listening to this and you've thought maybe you've had a business idea, or you want to post content on your social media, and you're immediately like, well, I can't talk about that because like a million other people talk about that. And who am I to talk about that because it's been done before? And I can tell you, if you think that, every single person on earth thinks that. But what people can't take from you is a story that has, happened to you in your life, or a takeaway or a lesson through your lens. And so, the three types of stories I like to talk about in marketing are, there's the stories you tell about your brand if you're a business owner. And those would be like, my brand story is that I said it earlier on this podcast. I was in the marketing world for a long time. I got jaded. I hated all the marketing I was hearing or seeing online. I decided to do something about it, blah, blah, blah. That's my brand story. It all of a sudden makes people go, oh, that makes sense. Yeah. Right. So I can tell stories about why my business exists. I can tell stories about how I came to be here today. I can tell stories about what my values are as a business, or the things that really ruffle my feathers, or what I'm fighting against in the industry. And those are all really relatable stories from that brand side. I can also tell stories about my customers, if you're on my email list, I might tell a story about one of my customers who experienced doubt or uncertainty or fear, or something that they were going through, to then make you feel like, oh, okay, yeah, this person feels that way too. I just did that when I said, if you've ever felt like you can't post something because it's been done before, you have a business idea and you don't think it's relevant because someone else is posting about it. That's me telling a story about you that's relevant to you. And then there's what I call content stories, which are really just anecdotal. You'll never guess what happened. Life stories that just become good content that connect you, the customer, and me, the brand, together in a way that makes sense. And so I think about that all the time. It's like, am I telling a story about me? Am I telling a story about you? Or am I telling a sort of a random content story that has a point? I mean, we could talk about random stories all day, but the story that you're telling that, has a point and somehow does the job of connecting me to you. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And then, like, what I mean, this is a separate podcast entirely. I was going to ask you what makes a good story, or what makes a good, but perhaps like what makes a good storyteller is maybe more relevant to those listening. Of when we talk about that you're your own brand, that your marketing is part of storytelling, you have to do it in your own authentic way that aligns with your purpose and your mission. Like, how do you teach people to stay aligned with that when there are so many different ways to approach all of this stuff, and there's lots of different schemes and tips and tricks? Like, what's the Alex Cattoni version of getting the voice and the mission and the thing all in one congruent place?
Yeah, I think, and this isn't obviously like the most strategic answer, but becoming a good storyteller takes practice, just like anything else. And so what I do and what my process is I've actually started literally thinking in terms of, oh, that would make a good story. Like, you and I might be having a conversation one day and I'd be like, I don't know how this is relevant at all to my audience, and maybe it isn't, but that's an interesting anecdote, or that's an interesting thought. Like, I remember one time I was in France, and I was at this champagne house, and the guy said something along the lines of, what's kind of crazy about these vines is that, they were planted by the current owner's grandparents, and they planted them knowing that they would never taste the wine that they were planting. And it was like, I just remember thinking, like, that's such an interesting idea. Like, this idea of like leaving a legacy and knowing that you can plant a vine that you'll never drink wine from. And I remember writing it in, like, I have a note in my phone. And like, so stories to me start as just these little like lightning bolts of inspiration that strike a chord in my heart. And I have I at that point, I'm not like, ooh, yeah, this is good marketing. It's just an interesting idea. And I think you're so good at this too, Jared. Like, you just sort of hear something and you ponder it for a bit, and you're like, I don't know, is that something? So I have what I call a story inventory that just has, like, literally, it's like a list of just all these random things. And then oftentimes when I need to start thinking from a marketing perspective about a concept or a teaching point, because here's the thing about storytelling, like, we could sit around a campfire and I could tell you what makes a good story is one thing, but what makes a good story in marketing, I mean, it needs to have a point. One might say a good story has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and needs to make a point. And so I'll go, oh, I really want to tell a story here that builds trust, or I want to tell a story here that makes my audience feel understood. And to me, that's when I go, oh, where can I pull from this story inventory and bring a little nugget of an idea forward that helps me prove my point? Does it fit? Does it not? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But the way I use storytelling and marketing is a very organic process. And anyone who says, give me a formula for storytelling, yes, there's a ton of different ones that are used in screenwriting and all of that. But at the end of the day, it comes back to it being an organic, I think, and beautiful process to being able to make a point and do it in a way that pulls attention forward.
Yeah.
I feel like that didn't really answer your question,
No,
but
you're good. We've got time. I have more questions. I was thinking,
okay.
is it McPhee, the famous screenwriter? Is it Robert McPhee, or like taught for decades? Like, all the main Hollywood players go to his lectures, and it's like, here's how the first act, you introduce the characters, then you have a conflict, and
Right. The 3-part structure. Yeah.
Whereas I do something similar, and I was kind of smiling as you were describing that. Like, I'll be driving down the road and see a billboard that has just like a killer line. I'm like, oh, that's a good line. Or I'll be watching a movie, like, oh, that's a good line. And it's just like sticks, or I put it in the notes in my phone, or I've heard other people describe an email draft that you just save ideas as the parking lot, or Buddy Wakefield says,
Oh, I like that.
where does it pack heat? You just like sets it aside for later. And then you've got your little bag of potential starting points, right? Rather than beginning from scratch. And it's like, okay, I need a story about da, 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 da. And you go through it, you're like, oh, that one will work. And I think part of the fun, at least as a creator, is, okay, I've got a story about this vineyard in France, and I need to sell this online program about turkeys. Like, how do I make that work? Right. And I think that is part of mad scientist or genius that you have is like, that's a skill, right?
Well, because you could always tell, I call it like the cringy pivot when you're reading an email and you're like, where is this going? And then it's usually a line that's like, that reminds me, or like, speaking of it, you're like, what? No, that doesn't make any sense.
Cringy
Yeah.
pivot.
And it does. Yeah. The cringy pivot. It takes practice. But the beautiful thing is, going to our point earlier, is that my advice would be, in the beginning, like, let's just say you're like, you know what, I really do want to start connecting with people more by telling more stories. Because I used to really struggle with it, because it'd be like someone putting you on the spot and be like, Jared, tell me a joke. And immediately, even if you're the funniest person on the planet, you're like, knock, knock. And you literally can't think of one. Like, you're like, I don't even have a joke. This is ridiculous. You probably do, because you're pretty funny, but
I
feel
told
like
one
you
on
probably
a
do.
previous podcast. It was like a horrible joke, but I'm reminiscing about that. But I get your point.
Were you
It's
super
like,
funny?
no, it was. Do you want to hear the joke? Okay,
Well,
so
I mean, you opened a massive loop there, but so yeah.
yeah, I mean, cringy pivot. I also was going to offer you. Sounds like a rock band that played Coachella last year. Like, uh, but so I was on the bridge in Spain, and I was leading this walk that I do on the
Mhm.
Camino, and we were looking down over the bridge, and there was all these fish swimming underneath the bridge. And I turned to the woman next to me and I said, "Do you know what you call a fish with no eyes?" And then she did not know, and I said, "Fish."
I got it.
I mean, so that's a word joke, so that kind of aligns, but
I really like
that,
it. Yeah.
now we're entirely off track. I have a question though. When you talk
Yeah.
about marketing, and hopefully that wasn't a cringy pivot, what's the opposite? Like a smooth transition? Is that the opposite of a cringy pivot?
Yeah. Or like, you don't even know it's like, yeah. Smooth transition. I like that. Let's call it that. Where you don't even know if you're pivoting, you're just like, wait, all of a sudden you're just buying and you're like, what happened?
Yeah. How did that? I was reading about a vineyard in France, and now I have my credit card in my hand. What just happened?
I think I blacked out. Yeah.
I think
If anyone could do that, yeah, no.
okay, so when you talk about marketing, and the question overall is about pain points of, hey, you're trying to connect with the reader or the listener or the watcher, right? The potential client. You're trying to connect with them in a
Mhm.
real way, and you're saying, hey, I used to not have confidence, not love my body, uh, be a terrible salesperson or whatever, and you're selling the medicine for that thing you've discovered in yourself. How do you do that without feeling like you are that taker energy that's like, that I see so often in the personal development
Yeah.
space, especially. And it's like, oh, you have this person in the palm of their hand and you know how they work and you're pushing all the buttons, and like, I don't love that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't love it either. And what's is interesting the right word? When you're reading something, it's like, it's also cringy when you're like, let's say, reading something and that someone's pushing all the buttons because they took a program to push all the buttons, and you're like, I can see this like
Yes.
happening. And good marketing, there is no awareness around like they're pushing buttons. It's because like that's clunky, that's like, okay, great. So I get this all the time where I'll get like cold outreach emails from people, and I literally, it's like they're all using the same script. I'm like, who's teaching this? Like, you can just see it like right in front of you. This like, someone is teaching people how to do this. And so
The one
for
sentence
me,
hook at the start, and then the like brief ask in the middle, and it's like,
yeah. Or I've even gotten like, hello, Alex, I see that you graduated from insert post-secondary institution here. And I was like, God, ridiculous. Yeah, so I like to talk about something called the emotional buyer's journey, because a lot of people, when you learn marketing, they'll talk to you about like the funnel, and it's like, don't get me wrong, like sales funnels are important, and it's all the mechanics of marketing and all that, and it is really important. But everyone talks about like what you have to do or like what buttons you have to push, but it's all from the perspective of the marketer, the one doing the selling. And so I like to flip that on its head and think, what is the actual emotional journey that a customer has to go through in order to ultimately say yes to buy from you? And then how do you do that in a way which is not fear mongering? Because unfortunately, you're right, you still see that everywhere. And humans are hardwired like to do two things: either avoid pain or go after pleasure. And it's been proven that people will do more to avoid pain than to gain pleasure. And so when you start applying that to the marketing world, it's like, oh, well, I could use aspirational marketing and only talk about the good, but that's not going to be as powerful as talking about the bad. And so, like, at a base level, that is absolutely true. But there is a way to speak to someone in a way that doesn't put salt in the wound or make them feel worse about themselves in the process. And that's kind of what I like to think about in terms of using pain in marketing. Is I like to actually, like, some people will say like use pain. I like to say use empathy and hope, because empathy is reflecting back at your customer what they're experiencing and then providing a solution that provides hope, which is a positive emotion. So how can you take this like potentially negative thing, but really actually make them feel understood and empowered on the journey? And so when I talk about the emotional buyer's journey, the first primary emotion that an audience or your customer needs to feel to buy from you is understood, like first and foremost. So it's that message of, I get you. And there's a really big difference. And the way you even said it was actually very much how I would say it, which is, hey, I used to experience imposter syndrome, or I lacked confidence, or I, did XYZ or had this problem. And so I get you. All that has a very different energy than, do you hate yourself, when you look in the mirror, like that kind of stuff where you're just like, oh, like you see that and you're just like, no. And it pisses me off, because guess what? It still works. And I know that there are a lot of people out there that respond to that, and I hate it so much. But making your audience feel understood. And there's a way to do it that is leading with empathy and the messages, I get you, without putting salt in the wound. And all of your people, Jared, and everyone listening to this, everyone can feel the difference. Everyone knows. They're all, very emotionally intelligent. And to me, when you read marketing, where you're like, whew, yeah, finally someone who really understands like what I'm going through. And it doesn't have to be this like deep, dark thing. Like it could be like, hey, do you hate when your cat goes into the litter box and then they scatter kitty litter all over the floor? And it's like, oh my God, yeah, I hate that. It doesn't have to be this like deep, dark thing. It's like just making your audience feel understood. Once you make them feel, so there's 5 core emotions. Once you make your audience feel understood, the next emotion you want them to feel is safe. So it goes from I get you to I got you. So it's, this person understands what I'm going through. Then it's, I feel like this person understands and can actually help me, and I feel safe in this conversation. And okay, I got you. So there's trust there. So building trust, aside from garnering attention, is probably the most powerful skill that anyone could ever master in marketing and sales and anything like that. In any relationships, let's be honest, trust is hugely important. Then the next emotion you want your audience to feel is empowered. So that's the, you got this, right? So I get you, I got you, and then you got this, meaning I'm not like your magic button, like gonna save you from all of your problems. Like I want you to feel empowered to take action to do this for yourself and to make a change. And the best way to do that is through, showcasing case studies or testimonials, or, hey, look at these other people who are on this journey and have experienced results. That increases believability. It's showing that it is possible for other people and you can do it too. Then the next emotion is excited.
Sorry, before we get excited, is part of the process that you just described of empowering the person, could you simply say like, hey, I'm not going to manipulate you into buying this thing, or like, I'm not your guru, or this isn't the one size fits all approach. And you kind of like name the obstacle that might be preventing them from doing that.
100%. I have to take my sweater off, by the way, because it's getting freaking hot in here. I'm getting fired up. I'm getting fired up on this conversation.
Okay.
Yeah. So you'll see that all the time in my marketing, and people will even say this to me. Like, I just love that you said that. Like, people will message me and say, what, like, will your will your program help me get my first client? And I'll say, listen, like, I'll give you everything I have on how to do that, but like, I can't tell you that because that's absolutely up to you to take action and actually implement. And unfortunately, most people don't do anything with this information, which really sucks. But if you're committed to taking action, then, you know, like, to me, and I'll often say, like, I'm not going to try to convince you, because if I convince you and then you buy and you don't get results, guess who you're going to come after? No, like, I'm all for taking radical self-responsibility. And I use that messaging, which does it turn away some people? Probably. Do I lose some sales as a result because I'm not promising, you know, that this is an easy button to make money? Probably. But what happens is I'm building trust and believability in the process because I'm not trying to pull the wool over their eyes, you know?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point to double down on, which is like the process of describing the product is part of the trust building exercise. It doesn't start like once they're in the door and the thing is underway. It's like, no, the moment one, like, you're doing that. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So then excited. And this is where most people start with their marketing. They don't do all the foundational stuff. And so that's where they, like, you get a lot of the hype, like this is the best offer in the world. And you're just like, wait, what? Like, and they wonder why their marketing doesn't work. Like, they'll be like, I discounted this 99.9% and people still aren't buying. And they wonder why. It's because you didn't do any of the foundational stuff. You're just expecting someone who doesn't feel understood, safe, or empowered to take action to buy your offer. And doesn't matter how much you discount it, it's not going to work. And that, you know, to me is the showcasing possibility. So for someone to get excited, you want to really demonstrate what the after could look like for them. You know, what's possible in their lives, or, you know, again, I don't want to make it sound like we're only selling like these super life-changing, you know, programs and things like that, but I come from a personal development background, and I know you're very,
but so it could be like,
world.
Imagine you get home from work and your tiled kitchen floor has no kitty litter on it. There's no kitty litter to be seen.
Yeah.
It is, you could eat off of it. It's so clean.
You can walk barefoot and not have that feeling of that cringy little crispy thing sticking to the bottom of your feet. You know?
There's got to be like at least one person listening to this that works for a kitty litter company that's just rapidly writing down notes right now. Like, oh, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, or maybe we should just start a kitty litter or a kitty box company. You know, let's just do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have a cat, neither do you, right?
No.
We're not the best at that. But.
Yeah, and like, but even that is like a really good example of like, hey, maybe we shouldn't sell kitty litter products because we don't have any experience. We can't build trust. I don't got anybody when it comes to this, right? Versus the other stuff that we do sell. I know that both of us are like, yo, I'm selling this thing. Like, here's the price. And like, I'm fire at this. Like, I got you. Like, it comes to this niche, like, oh, I fucking got you. Like, game on. So like, that's why we're not selling kitty litter. Like, I don't know anything about kitty litter. Yeah.
You're right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
see, I could go like I could ask for friends for a cat. I could pose for like fake selfies with cats, but like at the end of the day.
And like, you have a tool, like you could sell the shit out of a kitty litter thing too. Like with your skill set, you could be the kitty litter queen, like, no doubt.
I could be the queen of kitty litter. Yeah. Okay. Well, you know, that maybe in another life, another life when I'm a cat lady.
But like, you would never do that because you have integrity and honesty, you know. Yeah. Anyway. Okay. So after we get, what is it? Safe, understood, empowered, excited,
safe, empowered, excited. Yeah.
And then
there's one more emotion.
Yeah.
So everyone's like, what's the fifth emotion, Alex? It's committed. And that's like, again, that's like okay, this is where people are like, now I'm actually ready to give you my money. And that might take, as I mentioned earlier, days, weeks, months, years. For me, the length of time it takes for someone to buy for me, like, to me, it's irrelevant because I want someone to buy exactly when they feel ready to and committed to buy from me. Because when not forced into a decision, they will not only buy from you once, but they will buy from you again and again and again and again, because you have given them control of the buying experience rather than taking control of the buying experience. And so, you know, I make 80% of my revenue from existing customers. And that's because my existing customers, once they're in, they're like Posse for life, you know, and I love that. And so whether it takes them a few days or a year to get to that point is totally fine. And that leads back to when I was talking about, you know, storytelling and content creation. To me, the best marketing strategy is just making your marketing valuable in and of itself. So even if I'm sending an email or writing a social post where I'm selling something, I still want people to read that and get some sort of value out of it, whether it's like a little chuckle or like, oh, I didn't know that, you know, stat or piece of information, so that they look at it and they're not just thinking, oh my God. And don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean I don't sometimes send just like, hey, last day to join this program before we go live tomorrow or whatever. It doesn't mean I don't ever do that. But the number of times I do that compared to the other times, which is me really thinking about how can I make sure that even reading this email or this social post is going to add something to this person's experience with my brand, because that's just one touch point in what might be hundreds of touch points before they decide to ever buy anything from me.
Yeah. Yeah. I simplify it as like, I want them to learn, laugh, or feel. Ideally, all three. Like when in an Instagram post, for example, or an email, it's like they can learn something, if they can laugh, you know. So like occasionally, I don't know if those listening have like seen my Instagram post, and then randomly in the middle, I'm like, I make a joke, or I don't know, have some fun. It's because of that. I'm like, oh, this is a little bit dry. This is a little heavy. I should like lighten the load and release the pressure from this traumatic story I'm telling.
But that's so you too, like having
Yeah.
had so many in-person conversations with you, that's like, that is who you are. And I think that's again what makes marketing so great is just showing up as you are, without trying to fit into any sort of mold, because people can feel that. Like we can all think of times where we see something online or on, and we can't really explain it, but like, we're like, oh, that feels that doesn't feel, that feels weird. I'm going to unfollow that person or whatever, you know? Yeah.
So when you work with people that are feeling insecure or a lack of confidence, and you're telling them, oh, just use your voice and be yourself and share your story, how do you help them understand that that's actually the secret sauce, or to start making progress in that direction?
Yeah, I mean, that comes up so much. And I think the best thing I can share is that everybody feels that way, I think. I mean, it's like a whole, like, you think about how social media has just completely changed how aware we all are of the way we're perceived online, and like what people are going to think. And, you know, I spent so much time waffling over, you know, I had this idea of starting a YouTube channel, and I thought about it for so long, because I was this kind of perfectionist who wanted to do it right. And I wanted to know the exact strategy to follow to guarantee my success. And the first couple months of videos, I watch them now, I'm like, God, it was so awkward, because I was trying so hard to be someone I wasn't, you know? Yeah, like exactly. I feel scripted. I feel, I don't even recognize myself. Does anyone else notice that? No, not really. And I think that's the thing, is realizing that like nobody's looking at you that hard. You know, I think we have this fear that like, we're going to put something out there and then everyone is going to be like, snicker, snicker, snicker. I knew it. See, that person doesn't know what they're talking about. They're a total fraud. They're, you know, all of the things that we tell ourselves in our heads. And, you know, in the beginning, I think like it does take some time to get more comfortable with sharing. And the only way to do it is to move through it. There's never going to be a moment where you're like, this is gonna feel super easy. Even now, I still sometimes have those moments where I'm about to push publish on something, and I'm like, this makes me feel uncomfortable. But I'm like, no,
Yeah,
I'm
so
gonna do it. Like, I want to share this.
like years ago, I realized that I need to flip that narrative entirely. And so now, like, I pursue those moments that you just described. Like, if I've gone too long on Instagram, for example, where I don't feel scared to post something, then I know that I'm just marinating in my comfort zone and I'm not expanding or growing. It doesn't make it any easier, but it makes it a little bit more fun when I'm like, oh, I gotta up level now. Like, this sucks.
Totally.
Don't love
And to hear
that.
someone like you say that you still get uncomfortable to post stuff, I think that's so relatable. It's like, yes, it's not like you all of a sudden one day are just like, I'm always just gonna feel great, putting myself out there in that way. You kind of train yourself to sit on that edge of that comfort zone. And I bet you, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, every time you post something that makes you feel slightly uncomfortable, you get way more positive feedback than any of your safe stuff.
Yeah, it's more real, right? And people can
Mhm.
feel when you are at the edge of your comfort zone, at the edge of your capability. Like, there is something so relatable about being scared and doing it anyway that I think people are really drawn to, like moths to a flame. Like, you can't fake that kind of vulnerable. I mean, you can fake vulnerability because we're creators and writers and you're a marketer, but you absolutely can. But and you see it though, like you see the fake vulnerable shit online
You can
masquerading
see
as
it.
marketing. It's like, that's not actually
Yeah.
scary for you. You're just using all the
Yeah.
words. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah,
I was talking to it's like a funny, I don't know if this is relevant to anyone listening, but I was talking to one of my friends yesterday, and it was about like someone in my community had said, I've been doing this thing for a while, and like I feel like I'm just back at square one, like, just back at, I feel like a beginner all over again. And as she was talking in my head, I'm thinking, I feel like a beginner every damn day. I'm like, does she not know that? And then I was talking with my friend who was also on this call with me, and I said, it's like, and he actually used the analogy of like Mario Brothers, where he's like, there's levels and you start to play Mario Brothers. So imagine it's like you want to start a business or you want to start creating content online, and you're like staring at your Instagram account and you're like, I need to start creating content. And you're comparing yourself to like who knows, maybe Jerry. You're comparing yourself to someone who's already on like level 10 of this like Super Mario game that we're on. And so you're scared. You're scared to put yourself out there, but then you start the first level. And it's a little bit awkward at first because like you don't know when the fireballs are coming, and you don't know when you're supposed to jump to like get the mushroom, and like you kind of have to figure it out. And it's awkward at first. You die right away, and you're like, oh God, right back. It's like that's the start, whatever. But then you get through the first level usually pretty quickly, and then you killed the Bowser at the end of the first level, and you're like, oh my God, and then it unlocks the new level. And you just were on the top of your game, feeling like you were like the champion of the earth, and then you're on level 2 and you feel like a total beginner again. And guess what? There's like new fireballs. And now there's like these like spinny things with like spikes on them that can like, kill you. And then you're like, what the hell? And you might die a couple of times. And then you get to the end of that level, and then there's a new Bowser to kill. And I thought that was such a good analogy because, every time you get to a new level, you feel like you're a beginner again. And so I have that same kind of thought pattern in my business, is like, if I'm not feeling like a beginner again, I'm not pushing myself enough, or I'm not having uncomfortable conversations, or I'm not doing the things that I know I need to do to grow. But that doesn't mean you're back at square one either when you feel like a beginner. It just means you're starting a new level
yeah, you're back at square one of a new level. It's like the
of a
feeling's
new
the
level.
same, but the context is totally different. And like,
Yeah.
when you play that level again and again and again, and you know where all the bad guys are, and you know where all the secrets are, and you're so good at it, after a while it's boring and it's not very fun. Like, we deep down
Yeah.
want to be challenged and we want to feel alive. And unfortunately, starting again, feeling humbled, feeling overwhelmed, or like the imposter is a quick way to feel very alive. And when you're describing that video game, I pictured like a shooter game where you like get the bigger gun and maybe the bigger like armor, and you're like carrying this huge weapon. You're like, yeah, I'm a badass. And then you like go to the new level and it's like, oh, there's like a fucking Tyrannosaurus or something that like your gun doesn't work on. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
I need to up level and upgrade and learn some stuff.
Yeah. And
Um,
that's it. Like on that point, just again going back to like the confidence thing, and then we'll wrap up that conversation. It's like when you're just starting level 1 of whatever that new thing is, like let's just say it's starting to put yourself out there online. The scariest thing about that is you have no idea who else is at level 1 because you don't know them yet. So it's like you're comparing yourself to the people who are already further along than you. And like how cool of a gift could it be to be able to look at someone who, let's say, you admire online and love their marketing, and be able to like rewind to when they were first starting level 1? Because guaranteed they were just as like,
Yeah.
they were having the exact same thoughts that you were. And so the best thing you can do is just be like, you know what, I'm going to get through this first level, even if it's messy or awkward. And maybe this content or this storytelling isn't the best, or maybe I like it, that's okay. Like, just go for it, get through level 1.
The example I use with that is look back at Joe Rogan's first podcast episodes, because the videos are out there and they are horrible. It's just him fucking around with a bunch of his buddies in his like living room. And now he has,
Yeah.
the biggest podcast ever. And that's just how it is. You have to just get in the arena. But on that point of levels, I often will talk about people who say they're at level 1 and they're comparing themselves to those at level 3 or 5 or 10. And they're like, I can't create that course. I can't sell that coaching program. I can't make kitty litter royalty boxes or whatever. And not realizing that it's like a pyramid. So there's a whole lot more people at level 0 than there are at level 10. And if you can get yourself to level 1 with any amount of knowledge or skills or abilities, you can get paid to get people from 0 to 1. Like, that is a career, right? Like, I'm sure in your industry, there are lots of folks that are like copywriting 101, like for copywriting for noobs that are like, here's how to spell, right? Like, that's an industry. And like, we need that.
Yeah.
And then it builds from there. But it doesn't make it any less comfortable in my experience to begin.
Well, no. And the best thing about that though, too, is it's sharing it from this perspective of, hey, I'm only 2 steps ahead of you, or I'm only 1 step ahead of you. So I'm going to just share with you. And I talk about this in marketing, this idea of perspective. Everyone on the internet thinks that in order to start building an audience or having any sort of authority, they need to be the quote unquote expert. And that word has been thrown around so much. And then it also, I think, stops people from moving forward, because people who are maybe skeptics or cynics are like, I am not an expert. I'm not going to be that person who pretends to know that when I don't. And like, I love those people, because it's like, yeah, like, great. Thank you for not trying to be an expert at something when you're not. But there's other lenses through which you can relate to people. And so one of my favorite ways to kind of gauge this is to look at your favorite podcasts. So like, I'm a big true crime fan. And I listen to a whole plethora of true crime podcasts. I listen to ones that are like from the investigator's point of view, where they break down the forensics and they do like analysis, and it's all very scientific. And you're like, that's interesting. And then I listen to ones that are more like investigative reporters, where they're like on the ground doing interviews and they're gathering information that way. And then I listen to some that are literally just like 2 best friends who like love true crime, and they're sitting there just like jibber jabbering about true crime. And like, I relate to them in another way, because it's funny, and like they make mistakes and they say things wrong, and then they get corrected, and then they have to do corrections corner. And I think it's hilarious. And anyone who knows true crime will know exactly which podcast I'm talking about. And then there's like all these other ones that I listen to. And that actually is what got me on this idea of teaching this, is that there are different perspectives to build authority in any sort of messaging. And the expert, as in like, I'm a homicide detective who has 30 years of experience in the field, and this is my podcast, is a very different energy than, oh my God, I'm such a big fan of true crime. I know I'm a little bit weird. Like, how about you? Like, let's talk about this murder. Oh my God. Yeah, totally. Like a friendly sort of peer perspective is what I call it, versus the detective, which I think is one of my favorite sort of lenses, which is like, I don't actually really know any of this shit, but I'm going to go find it and then bring it to you, because I'm curious about it. Maybe you're curious about it too. Tim Ferriss started his podcast that way, just like interviewing people. Joe Rogan, right? Where it's just like, I don't know anything about this. I'm just going to interview the people who do. And so there's so many different ways to start showing up and sharing experiences in a way that isn't you pretending to be anything you're not.
I love that so much. And like, if you would have taken those 2 women and been like, okay, you guys have to do a podcast in the way that this 30-year veteran of the cop force beat thing did it like just wouldn't work.
It wouldn't work. No.
Yeah, there's a million products or people out there doing their own thing, but they're not doing it like you are doing it, right? And like that's the actual magical thing. They haven't lived your life. They don't say it the way you would say it. I think that's a really great way to finish. Like that was fire. I like that little true crime tangent, and I actually didn't know that about you at all. And I'm like, now learn something about you. Like, oh, you're
it's like a dirty secret that I keep, right? Like Jackson's always like, my husband's always like, God, why do you listen to that? And I'm like, I find it very, very relaxing. I'm like one of those. I guarantee that there are people in your community, Jer. They'll reach out to you after this. They'll be like, no, it's a thing. True crime. Way more people are into it than you think.
They'll know exactly what that podcast that you alluded to was too, I'm sure.
Totally.
Like, oh my God, Alex listens to fucking Bo and Jane talk blood or whatever it is. Like,
okay, well, that's a good podcast name. Talk blood. Okay, great.
Yeah,
I'm gonna start it. No, but that you're right. Great way to end it.
But do you listen to murder mysteries like to calm you down and you find it soothing? Like as an example?
Okay. Yeah. So, okay. I have never told this to anyone before, but I love this. You ask such good questions. Okay, so here's my take on it. I've tried listening to like sleep stories and stuff. And in, you know, like Calm app has like the sleep stories, which are supposed to make you like calm and relaxed. And in my mind, there is nothing more anxiety inducing than having really anyone, but like, let's say a man like whisper, like, now just relax. And you're just like, fuck you, man. Like, you don't know what I'm going through, whatever, right? So I find sleep stories the most anxiety inducing thing. And I think it's because I don't relax. And then I get in my head about like, what's wrong with me? Why am I not relaxing to this guy telling me that I should relax? So then I put on something that literally, it like shocks my, not, I don't want to say shocks my brain, but it's so outside the realm of what I stress about, which is like, let's just say business or whatever. It's narrative transport. Hey, look at that. We're bringing it back full circle. It's putting me into this state of just like being so immersed in a story that's so like outlandish and wild that I literally within 5 minutes, I'm asleep.
Yeah. I mean, it's like dream inducing, right? You get transported away from your current space, your current reality, anxieties, worry, and you're in a different realm. And it's like, yeah, away you go.
The pro tip though is, because then everyone always thinks like, so wait, do you fall asleep listening to murder podcasts? And then it's just like subconsciously programming your brain while you sleep. You have to put on the sleep timer that's like, it automatically turns off at like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So just in case anyone's worried that. Yeah, exactly.
Do you find, does it give you nightmares?
No.
You're like used to it now, huh?
But I also, and I also too, like there's different, now we're going deep into the true crime, genre. Yeah. But like, I don't listen to the super gruesome type of like true crime stuff. Like I'm not interested in the actual, like, I'm not interested in the actual, like, what to me, it's more of like, wow, what was that guy's childhood like that like made him do that? And so it's like 95% of the true crime podcasts I listen to are very little about like the act of the murder or whatever it is that happened. It's a lot of like the buildup and the really it's the storytelling and the psychology and the stuff that I find interesting about it.
It's like,
so that's my personal flavor of it.
Like putting the whole puzzle together, so to speak.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Exactly. Well, on that note, Alex Cattoni, marketing genius. I know you have an Instagram, you have your Copy Posse YouTube. I'll put links to all this stuff in the show notes. But is there any final words or anything we missed that you're like, Jared, come on, bro, I have to say this?
I can't believe you didn't ask me about this. No, honestly, this was great. This was one of my favorite podcasts because you're so great at asking questions. And I am fairly certain that I have almost never answered any of the questions you asked me in that way before. Yeah. Wow. So you are a great interviewer and it's fun. I enjoyed chatting with you.
Thanks. Yeah, we've already done like 64 minutes.
I know we could totally keep going. We'd go on so many tangents though. So, I think true crime and it's a great way to end it.
Yeah. I'll also share, we had dinner a couple weeks ago and I was sitting across from you and I realized I had this like epiphany moment of like, oh, like, I haven't had Alex on the podcast, because when I started the podcast, I basically just went through all my friends and was like, I need guests, made some calls, sent some texts. And then once I went through all my friends, I was like, oh, I expanded it out of like my acquaintances or like my friends of friends. And then, you know, it's been years now, but I was sitting across from you. I was like, wait, like what? Somehow you eluded my trap at the beginning of this. So I'm glad, you know, after 190.
Meanwhile, I'm over here with a complex. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you guys never asked me to be on this podcast. No.
How many YouTube subscribers
never.
do I need? Like, how many awards do I have to win to get on
I've just been doing it all for this moment.
You're retiring now. It's over. Like, sorry,
it's
Copy
gonna be
Posse.
in my like stage bio now. They're gonna say, you know, founder of the Copy Posse and guest on Jeremy Goldberg's Long Distance Love Bombs podcast.
I hope it's gonna be God, what did you call it? A crunchy pivot. What was the word?
A cringy pivot.
A cringy pivot, and you're like, stay tuned for my next career shift, and then you launch your like kitty litter queen brand. Like, I had a revelation. Anyway, we're off track. We're derailed. Big hugs to you. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate all the work you do. And if you're listening, Alex is one of the good ones. Go watch her stuff. Your videos are all, like, we're gonna end this at some point, I promise. But like, your videos are like, they're really well done, Alex. Like, I watched a couple in prep for this, and I was like, you've got it very aligned with your personality and like the quirkiness and the like vibrancy. It's good. It's really good.
Thank you. That took time to, I mean, I promise we'll end it. We've had like 3 false goodbyes. It's like those emails that we write, those emails marketers write with like 18 PS lines.
PPPS.
Yeah, so finally, PPPPS is that it took me a while to get there. Like, I remember this idea of like, when I first started doing YouTube videos, I was stressed out about it so much because it really felt like this production of like me having to get it right. And then now it's like, oh, I can just turn on the camera and just be exactly like who I am. But like, again, it took time. It takes time to feel fully confident and comfortable in that. And so, you know, I that's the best compliment that anyone can give me now is like, oh, when I see you online, it's like, you're exactly as you are in person. It's like, okay, great. Thank you. Like, but you know, it takes time to feel that comfortable.
I totally agree with you. Like, that's one of my favorite things to hear at events or retreats is like, oh, you're just Jer. Like, you're the same guy. And I'm like, yeah, I'm super fucking lazy. Like, I don't have time or energy to pretend to be some character on the internet. Like, I'm a lazy dude. It's just, this is what you get.
That sounds like a lot of work. Yeah, exactly.
How much work?
Yeah. And I could say that too. You are absolutely the same across all different platforms and in the human
real life. Yeah, they call that real life is the term. All right.
Real life. There we go. That's right. I stay online too much. We're gonna end it. Okay.
We're gonna end it. Like, I'm for real gonna click it. Okay.